All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Fireside Chicago, where we host fireside chats with prominent leaders from Chicago's business community, live on Zoom every Tuesday and Thursday, 11:30 Central Standard Time, with live Q&A. I'm your host, Tim Shum. I'm also the founder and president of Lucas James Talent Partners. Today on the show, we have a good friend of mine, Jeff Rosset, who's the founder and CEO of Sales Assembly. I'm going to introduce Jeff here in a second. Before I do that, Jeff is rounding out all of our guests for April. Jeff is episode number 6. We just started this thing. We're getting some great feedback. We got a great lineup for May. By the way, shout out to Smart Labs, who's our marketing firm that spun this whole entire show up in the matter of an 8-day period from concept to completion, design, website. You can kind of tell what slides Smart Labs had put together versus Mr. Shum. So I just wanted to point that out there. First, May 7th, next Thursday, we have Colleen Warner, CEO and founder of LulaFit, Aaron Levy, founder of Raise the Bar Consulting, a training consulting leadership development company. He works with most of the well-known Chicago-based companies. Really looking forward to having Aaron on the show. Jimmy Holleran and Paul Stancic from Parker Gale. Parker Gale is a private equity firm based in Chicago. They work primarily with technology companies. If you're interested in private equity, how this is changing the private equity space, their portfolio companies, definitely tune into that. On May 19th, we're having our first jam session. As we're calling it, we're having multiple guests on the show, all heads of sales of Chicago-based tech companies. Emma Galler from Built-In, you're probably familiar with Built-In Chicago. Adam Johnson from Active Campaign. Active Campaign just raised a ton of money just a few months ago. John Repka from Paro is going to be on. If you're interested in sales, what different companies in Chicago are doing, if you're a sales rep yourself, definitely check out that one. Julie Novak, founder, CEO of Party Slate. Amanda Lannard, CEO of Jellyvision, one of the most well-known technology companies here in Chicago. And then lastly, rounding out May, Joe Holberg, founder and CEO of Holberg Financial. If you're interested in personal finance, what to do in this COVID situation, specifically if you're a millennial, you have a millennial that's part of your network, your friends, your family, neighbors, definitely tune into that show where it's going to be very heavy personal finance focused. Back to our show today. So we have Jeff Rosset, who is the founder and CEO of Sales Assembly. Sales Assembly is a resource and community that supports Chicago tech companies as they continue to scale. In addition, Jeff founded and runs VentureScale, which is the nation's only sales dedicated accelerator for early stage SaaS companies. He's also a longtime and avid networker in the Chicago business community. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Rosset. Jeff, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, Tim. And I was just, I'm looking at the lineup coming up. I think I know everybody except for maybe one person that you had listed on there. Some solid guests. I'll definitely be tuning in for the panel. John, Adam, and Emma are all sales leaders of companies that are members of Sales Assembly. Emma and John, both really smart. Adam, hit or miss. So you should be good with at least 2 out of 3 of them.
Okay. I don't know Adam as well, but I won't tell him that you said that. Assuming you ever guys have a really good relationship there. Sounds good. Well, welcome to the show, Jeff. Just for context for everyone, we have a lot of attendees. There's going to be a lot of folks listening to this on a podcast that we'll be rolling out. We're going to cut this up into videos. Jeff and I go way back. We worked together 06, 07 into 08, company called Aerotech in the recruiting and staffing space. Both, entering the workforce around the same time, learning sales at that time, learning recruitment. Fast forward 10 years when I left Aerotech after a decade-long career there. I knew I wanted to go out on my own. I realized I didn't know anybody outside of my career at Aerotech employees, people that I had worked with, and I just didn't know anyone in the Chicago space. Jeff, you were one of my, I think maybe the first or second just coffee meeting that I had. I feel like now I know a lot of people 4 years later in Chicago. We're going to get into your kind of networking routine a little bit, but I did want to mention you were one of my first coffee meetings. You introduced me to a ton of people. You opened up your book to me. You totally helped me out at that stage. I want to get into how you go about networking because it definitely impacted me personally, but want to give you a shout out. I really appreciate that. I think Jeff's one of those guys that if you need anything, he's always got that give first mentality, anything I can do to help. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But Jeff, talk to us a little bit about first high-level sales assembly and venture scale, and then we'll get into some questions for you.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'll keep it super quick. Sales Assembly is a membership-based community for the sales and revenue leaders and their teams from pretty much all the high-growth B2B technology and SaaS companies here in Chicago. So we started the business about 3 years ago, late spring 2017. And really, we set out to kind of address two problems that were here in Chicago. The first was the fact that there was no formal community for sales and revenue leaders and folks on their teams from tech companies here locally. So if you're an SDR or an account executive or a revenue operations professional or head of customer success or the chief revenue officer, back in 2017, there was really no place for you to go and connect with your peers and share ideas and collaborate and commiserate and so on and so forth. And when you consider the fact that you take a look at all these roles, within a high growth B2B tech environment, if you're an account executive, you're probably doing a lot of the same things from one company to another. You're selling a different product to a different buyer, but your day-to-day activities, the terminology that you use, the technologies that you use, the strategies that you're following are very consistent. And it's the same with chief revenue officers. It's the same with heads of marketing and demand gen. So we thought, well, how come there's no community to allow these people to connect and compare notes and share ideas? So that was kind of the first goal. And then the second was the fact that all these organizations need a lot of the same things, from training to knowledge sharing to recommendations on software to talent for all the open roles that they were hiring for. So really what we wanted to turn Sales Assembly into was kind of like a one-stop shop for like everything that, if you're the CRO of a Series B tech company in Chicago, when you think about all the stuff that you need to continue to grow and scale, we wanted to create a platform where you can get access to all those things in one trusted place. And so that's what Sales Assembly is. Today, we have about 130 members. About 85% are companies that are homegrown here in Chicago, companies like Sprout Social, G2, Jellyvision, ActiveCampaign, et cetera. And then we have a handful of companies that are based in other cities like Upwork and Glassdoor and Pure Storage, but they simply have large sales offices here. So that's Sales Assembly. And then quickly, Venture Scale is more or less an accelerator for early stage B2B companies, mostly founder-led companies. So if you have raised, $500,000, you have 2 or 3 employees, you're doing a little bit of revenue, but you're not really sure how to build the structure of the go-to-market strategy and the ongoing sales function for your business as you continue to raise more money and grow. Venture Scale is a 6-month classroom-based program that helps these early-stage entrepreneurs to do that. We've done 3 cohorts to date, and we'll be opening up applications for our 4th cohort, which will launch in October. We'll be opening up applications over the summer. So that's like a really fun program that we run as well.
So 130 members. These aren't, guys, individuals. These are companies, correct?
Right.
And then they represent, multiple team members, multiple sets of leaders that Jeff, Matt Green, his partner, the rest of the team is able to touch. Incredible. Started in 2017, correct?
Right.
So one thing I was always impressed with, and I want you to speak to it if you can, Jeff was able to create almost this like FOMO, fear of missing out effect to your business, really by using like free promotion, it almost felt like, on LinkedIn. I've known you for a long time, as I've just mentioned, but you started in 2017. All those companies that you mentioned, I mean, those are all the major players here in the Chicago tech scene. I would see a new post of a new event almost every other day, I felt like, or at least a couple times a week, every other week, of an event just with dozens and dozens and dozens of people. And I got to imagine your buyers or your target market looked at that and said, hey, this is interesting. Let me be a part of that. Hey, maybe speak to that a little bit. How did you scale up in such a short amount of time with such a small team?
Yeah. You'd asked me when we were kind of chatting about this a couple of weeks ago to kind of just speak to the concept around building a community. And that's really what sales assembly is. It's a lot of things, but at its core, it's a community. And, early on, honestly, there's two things that I think looking back, were probably the two of the things that really helped us to build what we've done. The first is the fact that we decided to focus on a niche, which was high growth B2B technology and SaaS companies. And the reason why that was important was because while every company under the sun has sales, manufacturing companies, distribution companies, professional service organizations, every company could effectively use what Sales Assembly was building. But the fact that we were really dedicated to one specific niche, it encouraged people in that niche to want to be involved, because they knew that when they would come to a program or when they would get involved, they would be talking to people that understood them and that spoke the same language and that was dealing with the exact same problems. Because even though you might have two VPs of sales, one from a high growth SaaS company, one from a 90-year-old printing company, nothing against that printing company, but that person is dealing with a lot of different types of issues that the VP of sales of that venture-backed tech company is dealing with. And so creating that niche really allowed us to build that community, I think, a lot quicker than we would have if we had opened it up to any type of business. And the other one, quite frankly, is, a little bit of, I guess, fake it until you make it, to be quite honest. We started with 0 members, and I went out and many of you guys probably know Todd Capone, at the time the chief revenue officer of a company called Power Reviews. They were our very first member. And I remember meeting with Todd in his office back in like June of 2017 with like a 1-page Word document that I had put together, and basically saying like, okay, Todd, if you guys sign up, like, here's everything that you're going to get. And they signed up. And then I had to go out and figure out how to actually deliver on a lot of that stuff. But then it was just like one company after another, but a little bit of like that herd theory where, you post pictures of events on LinkedIn and you put a couple of logos up on the website of companies that you're working with. You have to maybe seem a little bit bigger than you are, so people have the confidence and the level of comfort where they want to get involved. And then it's just kind of like you add one member, and then you can promote a little bit more, and then you can add new services, and that allows you to add 1 or 2 more members. And then you could kind of just rinse and repeat that cycle until today, we're about 130 members, but we built them all one at a time. And so when people would see those pictures on LinkedIn or whatever, they were thinking, hey, this is pretty cool. I'm a VP of sales of a tech company. I want to be involved in that. Let me figure out how to sign up.
So you started in 2017. Just like me, I started my business in 2018. And I always tell people I was networking in this space before I planted the flag for Lucas James Talent Partners. I mean, your community building, your networking within the Chicago business community, let's call it, or at least the tech scene, dates way back when. Maybe talk a little bit about your philosophy around, giving back to the community, helping people out, probably early on taking every meeting, coffee.
Yeah, for sure. This could be like I've given this talk on this topic alone, and it can go a good 90 minutes, but I'll try to condense it to like 2. So I don't necessarily know that I have a philosophy on networking, but what I would say is I've always made it a priority, and I've always taken the approach where, above all else, I want to find ways in which I could truly and genuinely add value for other people. And that has always been my motivation. And it seems to have worked. And it dates back to, Tim, you had mentioned that we had met each other when we were working for a company out of college back in the day. I had left that company to start my own business. And due to a number of factors, one being the fact that I started it like right before the crash of '08, and I spent a bunch of money into the business. I didn't have a ton of dough just laying around for like marketing, right? So I had decided, okay, in order for me to go out and get clients right now, I'm going to have to start to meet people and get referrals. And that was really the start of learning how to quote unquote network and build relationships. But it's an art that you have to learn, and you have to get your own feel, and you have to get your own philosophy. But I can't even imagine how many thousands of coffee meetings I've had at Starbucks and Paneras and corner bakeries over the past 12 or 13 years since starting that business. Um, and you meet more people and you learn about how to help people, and then you're in a position where you can make introductions and you could be more valuable to them, and then the next person that you meet you could be more valuable to versus the person from before. And it's just a process. And I've talked to a lot of like young salespeople fresh out of college that want to do that, and I just tell them two things. I say, block time in your calendar, make it a priority. Don't just think networking is something that you're going to do when you have time. You have to make it, a legitimate personal development, professional development focus, where you actually block off a couple of hours every week to dedicate to it. And then number two is you have to add value and then do it genuinely and follow up. So don't just say, hey, I'm here to help you. What could I do to be helpful? And then somebody says, well, now that you mention it, I could really use some help with XYZ. And then you ghost them, because that happens all the time, and you're not helping anybody. So making offers, following through, and really just going above and beyond for other people, it's those are the foundations that I think really help.
I don't know if I ever told you this, but I mean, learning from just watching you, our initial meeting that we had, and then the subsequent, relationships that I've built over time. I mean, my business just started with me. I have a sales team now. We've basically taken what you're talking about and put it into our sales process. We don't do any cold calling, we don't do any cold emailing. Our 100% of our strategy is building goodwill with the community that we want to impact. Give first, give. And then, as you get thought of top of mind. Playing a long-term strategy of goodwill, your reputation is key. Bend over backwards, make friends, and bend over backward for them. So I give a lot of that credit to you for sure. Guys, if you have any questions for Jeff, feel free to post them in the Q&A button, bottom, center, left. We'll carve out the last 5 minutes or so to ask those questions. I see a couple piling up. Let's switch to COVID. I hate the fact that we have to talk about like what's happening and maybe belabor the points. I do want to bring this up with you. Whether it's your customer base or your network, I look at you as almost like the center point and having your finger on the pulse of what's happening in Chicago, how companies are reacting to this pandemic and how it's affecting their businesses. So just maybe talk openly about maybe first how this is affecting sales assembly and pivots you've had to make, but also like what are you hearing from your customer base and how they're reacting to this?
Did I lose you for a second, Tim?
Yeah, there you are.
There I am. Sorry, repeat that.
So we were just talking about how the pandemic, the shift in the economy is affecting all the businesses in Chicago. You being somewhat of a center point of the Chicago tech scene, what are you hearing from customers that, without stating any names, how are they reacting to this? How are they kind of switching up their sales tactics, if any?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, everybody, regardless if you're a tech company or what, everyone's dealing with a lot of the same stuff. Some dealing with more than others. Obviously, if you're a restaurant or whatever, you're a hotel, obviously you have different challenges than other types of businesses right now. But at least from my vantage point here in Chicago, I'm finding that companies are basically just trying to figure things out on the fly. Nobody has all the answers, but it's the ones that are just taking the approach where they're trying to be as adaptable as possible and open to any and all ideas about how to adjust and pivot and be flexible with how they've gone about doing business before, are the ones that I think are going to be set up to hopefully succeed out of this environment. Two other things that I've seen that seem to be resonating with companies that are starting to kind of figure this out right now. Number one is having a mentality that while times are tough and things are scary and there's a lot of unknown, it's really approaching this entire situation as an opportunity to grow and develop as individuals and as organizations. And, I'm in touch with my members every single day, and we do a lot of peer calls. And we're hearing a lot of stories about how organizations are using this as an opportunity to step out of their comfort zone and to try things that they've never tried before, or to take, best practices or processes that they've used for 5 years that have always worked pretty well, but for whatever reason at this time, they're not applicable. And they say, okay, we have to change the way that we do this, and just trying new things and realizing like, oh man, this is actually better than what it was before, when we thought before was actually pretty good. And I think we're going to find that a lot of the best companies are going to, 6, 12 months from now, these companies are going to look back, and the nature of their business as to how they operate is going to be different. And it's not only going to be because of directly COVID related things, such as like, oh, they can't travel as much as they once did, but they're going to be intentional business decisions that they've made, that they've come to realize we were doing things in the wrong way, or there's more efficient ways to do things than we ever thought before, and just kind of approaching it like that. And then as it pertains to sales, I think, trying new things, having to be flexible with how you go about prospecting or demand generation is important, but don't lose sight of the fundamentals. Don't lose sight of the things that got you to where you are. And if you're a 10-year veteran of sales, regardless of what you sell, you probably have a lot of best practices and things that you've done for many years. Don't just throw those out the window and start freaking out and going in a bunch of different directions. There's certain things that are time tested, and regardless of what you're facing right now, discipline with your calendar, using different channels to find prospects, refining your messaging, making it personal versus just doing like email blasts, like all those things. I think, some reps are kind of freaking out and they're trying everything under the sun, and it's just creating chaos. And some are just kind of taking a deep breath and being like, you know what? I've always used some of these tactics. They're always pretty well, and I'm going to continue to apply them.
Yeah, I think you bring up a lot of good points. I look at it, well, first, we share somewhat of the same network. I think there's a range of, we're doubling down in this environment. We're hiring in this environment to take advantage, or, of the fact that there's good talent out there that we could apply to our organization. I think those are some of the positive things that I've seen. I think regardless of stage of in the fundraising process that these tech companies have, some companies, depending on when they were going to raise their next round, seed A, B, C, D, kind of got caught with their pants down a little bit. And it's almost like that's almost dictating how they have to react to this, because their model kind of got flipped upside down. I think from like a sales perspective, you almost have to look at your product and service and say, how did this resonate in a bull market kind of environment where there's a lot of confidence and people were investing and buying things and acquiring companies and all that stuff that we dealt with over the past 7-8 years. And then say, do those same things still relate in a high unemployment, bear market kind of environment, at least in the short term? And then like around all that, you can't be tone deaf to the situation. I think putting yourself in the buyer's shoes and being very sensitive to that is probably one of the utmost things that are important right now in this environment.
Yeah, and the one thing that I would comment on that, Tim, is, and this hopefully goes without saying for most people, but really being conscious of your messaging right now. The message that you might have been using in the first week of March to get in front of a prospect, chances are it's probably not the same message as it should be today. And to that point, your personas that you're going after, the customers that you're calling into might have changed as well. Either industries, you might have been targeting hospitality, for example. Well, you know what? Might not necessarily be the best choice. You might have to pivot, your potential customers. So messaging and personas of buyers, those things should be reevaluated kind of on I'd say at least a biweekly basis right now. Because, even for sales assembly, I mean, the kind of some of the messaging that we were using to bring on new members back, early Q1 this year, it's just a different landscape than it is today. And so we're talking about some different things that we were before, and you just have to be aware of it. And you can't just be cutting and pasting the same canned messages that you were using for the past 6 months, because those aren't resonating right now.
I also think too, like the emotional side of sales is, from a leadership perspective, like your clients are sales leaders, managing through the emotions of your team. You're dealing with fear, you're dealing with uncertainty, you're dealing with scarcity, you're dealing with working at home, depending on what your at home situation is. You're dealing with your buyer being at home. You're dealing with no face-to-face meetings, now Zoom, all these different things. And I think there's almost like you need to put the pump up, speech, rah rah sports coach hat on. You need to put the therapist hat on in some cases, because I think a lot of reps that were used to the previous environment and were successful in the previous environment, their life is getting flipped upside down. And then as a sales leader, you can't have a disengaged sales team all at home when you're used to being in an environment. So I just got to imagine there's so many different variables that are affecting some of the sales leaders and your clients and really everybody out there that's in a sales seat.
Yeah, it's a tough situation. There's no doubt about it. But I think just being smart and making smart, calculated decisions, and trying to Matt and I we're kind of taking things week by week right now. We're making plans for the week, and we're adjusting things on Fridays or over the weekend and saying, okay, what's working, what's not, what's new, what's different in the landscape. And then we're implementing new things on Monday. And that's not only about messaging and sales. It's more importantly about our services and our resources and what we're actually doing for our customers. Not every company is able to kind of like build out new services or new deliverables on the fly as we are. But I think it's important to just be evaluating things. Things are changing so fast that whatever plan you put in place at the beginning of the year for 2020 or even for the quarter, probably out the window. And the leaders and the reps and the individuals that are just being aware of that and that are, smart enough where they're able to, take these plans and make adjustments are the ones that are at least putting themselves into the best position possible to make it through.
I think that's well said. You and I have been through, let's just call it a recession before, a tough environment to promote business activity to be successful in. And I think probably now more than ever, the storytelling around that, if you're a manager, supervisor, director, VP, C-level entrepreneur, and you've been through that before, more than ever, I think people that have not been through that before, people that entered the workforce in 2010 and beyond, I got to imagine a lot of these tech companies' sales teams maybe fit that kind of persona. And that's leading to a lot of fear. And what do I do in this scenario? You brought up a lot of good points. Hey man, we're pivoting, we're doing all these things. They might not have that context. So I would urge people that, if you have anyone on your team, in your friend group or otherwise that hasn't experienced something like this before, the storytelling time and just, rehashing that, hey, it sucks right now, but you're going to get through it is probably more important than ever. Hey, Jeff, we're going to get to a couple questions and then we'll shut it down. I know you need to go here. Christian Harris says, I am all about creating two-way relationships. Do you have any suggestions in a case where someone is not sure what value one can give to a new networking contact? Really good question. We were actually talking about this the other day.
Yeah. It depends on, Christian, thanks for the question. I'm not sure kind of what your background is or how long you've been at this, but, I always recommend for folks, do you ever see that Seinfeld episode back, like one of the early seasons where, Jerry has that guy that's always calling him for plans and he doesn't want to go out and do anything. So he like makes a list to keep on the phone of like excuses that he could give as to why he's busy.
Yeah.
So, along those same lines, like come up with a list of like, here are the 5, 6, 8, 10 things that I feel I could do that is of value to another person. And one could be like an introduction to another center of influence. Another could be, the offer to promote their blog, the recently published blog article, or if they're hosting a webinar, I'm going to make a post about it on LinkedIn. If I know that they target a certain type of industry, I might find an article that talks about that industry that I want to send to them and say, hey, I was just reading this and I thought of you. It might be helpful for you to check out. Whatever. I would challenge the fact that if you're truly interested in adding value to people, you could find at least one thing to do for every other person. And I don't care if you're sitting across the table from, Jeff Bezos, there's something that you could do for everybody that is of value. You just have to kind of open up your mind and think about, what do I have to offer and what could I do that would be helpful for them? And it's going to be different for every person. If you're meeting with an accountant, what you might try to do for them might be different than if you're meeting with a professional public speaker and consultant, for example. So knowing your audience, but then knowing what you have to give, I think are two important things. And you could kind of mesh those together, and you could always find something that you could do.
That's a really good point. I always tell, my team, put yourself in the other person's shoes right before that meeting, right before that call, right before that Zoom, and say, if I'm meeting with Tim at Lucas James Talent Partners, what's important to me? So other sales reps are looking for deals, or they're looking for other people that are well networked, right? Managers might be looking for hires. I don't know, venture capital and private equity folks are looking for deal flow, right? They're looking for ways that you can impact in a positive way their portfolio companies. You always got to put yourself in the other person's shoes and say, if I'm this person, what's of benefit to me? And then, as Jeff said, what do you have in your toolbox that you can benefit that person? And you just have to be disciplined around it and organized and go all in and give and support the community. It doesn't happen overnight, but it'll benefit you over time. Thanks for the question, Christian. Zachary Slade, what's up, Zach, asks, great seeing you, Jeff. How are you replacing the coffee meetings right now? Zoom versus general check-in phone calls, emails, etc. Also, what's the best way to break the ice on Zoom with people not used to the platform? Great question.
Yeah. Hey, Zach, that reminds me, we're probably due for a catch up, right, buddy? Honestly, like I haven't had the time to really do much networking in the past 2 months. I have a toddler at home who, obviously is daycareless at this point. Plus we just got through a pretty crazy situation, going through a move, not only the month leading up to it with everything going on, that's craziness in the world to actually get the mortgage, but then trying to get the house packed up and actually physically moved into a new house. And so I won't go into it, but bottom line is like, my work hour schedule has been reduced quite a bit over the past month and a half, plus trying to like pivot our business, one that was, 7 weeks ago, I would have told you that we're going to do 75 to 80 live in-person events in 2020. And we had to basically pause that on a dime and figure out how to completely pivot our entire business model to virtual. So, I'm probably not a great person to say, how have I replaced the coffee meetings, but, looking out a month when I do have more time to kind of get back into it. I always have a reoccurring calendar invite that pops up every week that encourages. So I have a list built out on Excel where it's just, I call them my COIs, my centers of influence. So these are the people like Tim and whomever that they're not prospects, they're not clients. They're just good people to know for whatever reason. And I like to keep in touch with them, at least on a quarterly basis. And I have a spreadsheet that I'll just like track, the last time I checked in with them and the last time we connected. And I'll start to finally work my way back through that list. And I'll be reaching out to people that I haven't seen in a while. And whether it's a Zoom, even if it's just a couple of emails back and forth, everyone's so busy. Don't think that you have to schedule a half an hour block of time with somebody, because again, keep in mind, like other people have kids at home, other people have parents that are now living with them. Everyone's life is turned upside down. So I don't think it's as important to like schedule those 30 to 45 minute check-ins as it might've been before. I think a simple back and forth 3 or 4 thread email chain might do the trick right now, just to kind of keep on top of mind with people. And maybe you save those check-ins for when people's lives are a little bit more normal.
Jeff, I think you bring up a good point. Zach, is Zach a salesperson, sales manager? What's the context there?
Yeah, he's in financial services at GCG.
Okay, so financial services. I think what I've found is, if you're talking to other folks that are in a business development capacity, they're in the same boat that you are, right? So I think, Jeff calls them center of influences. We call them strategic partners. Who are those people that are in the same boat that you are? that are just looking for other ways to have activity, find those individuals, find more of those individuals, create more friendships with that group. Maybe that's maybe 1 degree outside your buyer group, folks that can make introductions to your buyer with 1 degree of separation. And right now, more than any other time is a time to be efficient, right? I could only maybe pack in, 4 to 5 coffee meetings a day. And that's me bouncing around the loop in Chicago quite a bit. And then maybe a lunch, very impactful day. But I could have like 12 back-to-back Zoom calls with folks, and then just really make sure I'm pounding the pavement in that way to really move the needle on the relationship capital that I'm developing with people. And then Jeff brought up a really good point. Emails can get it done right now. Depending on who it is, they might not have time to speak with you. So just to have that positive mojo that Tim or Zach is looking out for you, has your back, you could get a lot done with very personalized emails to folks. So Monday through Friday going into the weekend, I think you could for sure make a lot of movement on the people that you're trying to get in front of or the people that you already know, just what the setup is, because everybody's in the same boat. So Jeff, thank you so much, man. I know you have a lot going on at home with the business, client base, and otherwise. Really appreciate you carving out the time. If folks that are listening today or watching today want to get in touch with you or learn more about Sales Assembly or Venture Scale, where can they find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's always good. I'm easy to find there. I try to be as active as I can, posting something a couple of times a week. LinkedIn's good. I'm not really on Twitter or any other media platforms. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Let me know whatever I can do to be helpful. Kind of unrelated to the specific discussion, but the last thing that I'll mention, just kind of going along the lines of, connecting with people. Keep in mind that people are working goofy hours these days. For example, I wake up between 4 and 4:15 every day, not because I like to, it's because I need to get a couple of hours of work in before my son Rocky wakes up so I could, be with him in the morning. And then I'm doing a lot of work at night. So the hours of like 8 to 5, I'm actually working very little. And a lot of my work is coming early in the morning, late at night, during his nap time, and then kind of like on the weekends. So if you're a salesperson, don't think that, the hours of 8 to 5 are when you have to be prospecting, because the person that you're trying to get in front of might also be in a similar situation. Try waking up one morning at 4 o'clock and pounding out a bunch of emails or prospecting activities. You might be surprised as to the type of traction that you're going to get with responses.
Very well said, Jeff. Thanks so much, man. Always a pleasure. Have a good rest of the day. Thanks, attendees. We'll talk to everybody soon.
All right, brother. Thanks, Timmy.